Hey everybody! Time for another comic review. But before we get into all that, I think there is something that I should really clarify as we continue to move onward, for those of you who are interested in how future reviews are going to be handled. When it comes to reviewing issues further down the line, I will be adjusting my expectations and how I look at the stories more critically. The reason for this is because, being such a long runner, the style and tone of this comic changes multiple times as it goes on, as any fan of the comic will happily tell you, going from a light-hearted gag-centric affair to becoming something arguably even more dark than its source material, and sliding all over the scale from those two extremes. Even though I may not be judging it purely on its comedy down the line, it is also important that one thing won't change as I review these books. I'm going to be looking at them from a modern reader's perspective. As much as I make fun of these early issues for being so cartoonish and silly, I will note that many of them do hold up as cartoonish and silly stories, even if some of them are so frustratingly stupid or inane that it kind of undercuts the comedy. So when the book does get more dramatic, I'll naturally start looking at it more from the perspective of its action and drama, as well as the little bits of comedy that they throw in. Just thought that was worth mentioning, as we are nearing the double digits, and once we start getting into the upper echelons of the teens, we're going to start seeing the comic rapidly start to mature into something much, much different than what we're looking at today. And what are we looking at today? Why, it's issue 7, of course. Look at how silly this thing is. Look at that cover pun. I'm a speed reader. What a novel idea. It's funny because he just destroyed an entire bookshelf worth of classic literature. Oh, Sonic. We open up the book to find ourselves in part 1 of our first story, Uncle Chuck's Treasure Hunt. Who is Uncle Chuck, you ask? Well, they do get into that a little bit into the story, but for context, Uncle Chuck was a character introduced in the Saturday morning cartoon show, notable for being Sonic's only named living relative, and also a poster child for just how disturbing roboticization can really be.
I've been dreaming of this since the first day I was roboticized.
You have? But I thought when you were roboticized, you didn't
Know what was going on? We know everything. We just can't do anything about it.
Let that line sink in for a second, along with the heavy themes that it's implying. He also became a very important player in the show's second season, and most likely would have gone on to hold something of a mentor role in the show if it hadn't been screwed over by the network before production could begin on its third season. But I digress. Let's focus on the comic right now, Our establishing shot is Tails trying out a new seesaw he apparently made by himself, and Rotor dashing forward to try it out. Rotor then leaps onto the end of the seesaw, crashing down with enough force to launch Tails up into the air and get his head stuck in the ceiling. Tails' body is then torn from his head due to the massive forces of gravity at work. No, of course not, he pops up just fine, Sonic catches him, and Rotor, who had unsuccessfully attempted to catch Tails, catches a rolled-up parchment that fell from the ceiling with Tails. Convenient that Tails just happened to hit the exact spot that was hiding the piece of paper, wouldn't you say? They uncurl the paper to discover... Hey, connect the dots. Rotor, 2 quick questions. 1, how old are you? And 2, aren't you supposed to be the genius of the group? No, I'm not making that up. This was well before the days where Tails would be established as having a gift for mechanics and robotics rivaling Eggman's abilities. At this point in time, Rotor is a gadgeteer genius of the group, or at least he's supposed to be. Anyway, the map is actually to Uncle Chuck's greatest treasure. Sally, Rotor, and Tails are quick to point out that even if it is treasure, it's worthless at this point since money in general has no value. Yeah, now lots of things are worth more, like chewed up gum, rusty paper clips, peanut shells, dirt, bitcoins, PlayStation Network trophies, Minecraft diamonds, Xbox achievements, the list goes on and on. Sonic, however, reminds the team, and thus exposits to the audience, that Uncle Chuck was a famed inventor, and therefore might have hidden something away that could be used to defeat Robotnik once and for all. Well, that's what he means, but what he actually says is that Chuck might have had something magical for them to use. Given how closely magic and technology coexist in this world, that's not too terribly out of the realm of possibility, but the way that Sonic's phrased it, it almost sounds like he's expecting to find an actual Deus Ex Machina that will fix all their problems. Shut up, you know what I mean. And so the next morning, the Freedom Fighters set out for the Mobius Natural Park to try and find the treasure. Sally is quick to remind them all to be careful of any badniks while she's casually breaking the laws of physics and sitting on air. It's a chance we have to take, Sal. It's literally a chance you take every time you set foot outside of Knothole, Sonic. I'm pretty sure that you all know the risks at this point. The group reaches Mobius Natural Park and jeez! It's kind of like if Dr. Seuss was going through really bad depression and just cut straight to the chase with the Lorax. No, the good Lorax. That's better. The Freedom Fighters proceed to loudly talk about finding the treasure, complete with plenty of exclamation points so you know they're not using their indoor voices. They are immediately spotted by two nearby SWAT bots who decide to deliver the information they've just gathered to Robotnik. He may even treat us less nasty than usual. Given that this is Robotnik we're talking about, I'm gonna say no to that. Sonic and friends continue to follow the map, but all of the chemicals and nasty smells are starting to make Sally ill. So Sonic kicks it into overdrive to follow the map straight to a literal X on the ground. How had no one already dug that thing up? Did they all just look at it and go, nope, that's just what they'll expect me to do? Tails veers off to the side to find a flower that managed to somehow survive in the pollution, only to narrowly avoid getting zapped by Robotnik and his badnik horde. The Freedom Fighters separate, intent on dividing up Robotnik's forces, something that greatly amuses the good doctor. It will be even more fun hunting them down one by one. Spoken like a true sadistic sportsman, Robotnik. And then, BAM! Part 2. Anyone else getting tired of these story divisions? Anyway, Robotnik, having lost Sonic inside a tree stump of all things, reminds Sonic that he and his friends can't hide forever. Quite literally, as the polluted environment will eventually kill them off if they hang around in it too long. This was actually pretty cleverly established back when Sally started getting sick, showing actual consequences to them being in a toxic area. Well played, comic, points to you. Sonic rushes off, stating that he needs to find a way to use the environment to his advantage. And one by one, he proceeds to save his friends, doing just that. He tricks a Burrowbot into sticking its nose into an acidic waste tank that destroys its drill, he tricks two SWAT-bots into stepping into a sticky ooze puddle, and slides out of the way of a charging buzz bomber on a long oil slick. Robotnik himself seems to have vanished for some reason, but no time to worry about that now, we have a treasure to unearth. Sonic and his friends dig up the treasure, which is in a proper treasure chest and everything. Can we get the Muppets to sing some ominous music?
Shiver my timbers, shiver my soul, yo-ho-dee-ho.
Sally compliments Sonic on the feat of saving them all, and while Sonic is busy pondering the word feat, Robotnik dashes by and grabs the chest before flying off, laughing maniacally now that the treasure is all his. Sally asks Sonic why he isn't trying to get the treasure back, to which Sonic responds that he remembered exactly what Uncle Chuck's most valuable treasure is when Sally made the whole feat remark. Rather than explain it to them, he instead tells them all to head back to Knothole, as they really won't want to be around when Robotnik opens up the chest. We cut to Robotnik having opened the chest, and he's throwing a massive tantrum because it turns out that the treasure was a pair of Sonic's bronzed baby shoes. As much as I make fun, this is actually a pretty sweet and sentimental ending, which only helps the whole bronze shoes joke that the story was building up to. It's an inconsequential story, but it was a fun one, and it gets something right that some of the past stories didn't. It's true that not all of the Freedom Fighters were here for this one, Bunny and Antoine specifically, but the story is structured in a way where the reader doesn't question their absence. They weren't needed for the story, and their absence does not feel nearly as invasive as Bunny's absences in stories like Lizard of Oz or Olympic Trials and Errors. And now we enter our second story for the issue, Sorceress in Distress. Our Freedom Fighter friends are getting ready for their annual Halloween, Fright Night celebration, with everyone getting into costume. Gotta say, I do miss days like this. This is back when Halloween costumes actually meant something and people actually put effort into their costumes. Sally, however, is a little bummed with the fact that she does not have a complete costume, saying that she needs a stick to use as a staff to complete the ensemble. Princess, far be it from me to point this out, but you kinda live under a freaking forest. Sticks are not in short supply, and you didn't have to wait until now to realize you were missing a prop. Antoine offers to go out and help her find one for her protection. While Antoine usually only does this sort of stuff to get Sally alone and try some clumsy romance, he does make a very good point. Going out on her own would be very dangerous for Sally, and having an extra set of eyes is the most logical suggestion. But this is early Archie Sonic the Hedgehog, where logic is more scarce than, well, most of the main Sonic games, honestly. Sally storms off, practically snarling at the others that she doesn't need anyone to protect her, and immediately decrees that she will beat the ever-living hell out of anyone who tries to follow her. Well, okay, she puts it much more nicely than that, but it's the same basic message. And remember, she's not only one of the good guys, she's supposed to be their leader. We rejoin Sally a short time later as she is picking a gnarled, curved stick up off the ground, commenting that it does look quite perfect to be a magic stick, and thinks to herself that it would be so cool if it really were magic. Yeah, be so. It's supposed to be two separate words, but the lettering sort of makes the two words bleed together in this image. A helpful panel shows us what's about to happen before it happens, pointing out that a nearby boulder is conveniently located right on top of a geyser that is ready to burst. Also, sleeping gopher, because why not? Sally jokingly tells the rock to rise, and to her utter shock, it appears to do just that, apparently missing the giant stream of water spurting out in front of her. Also, for some reason, we have a narrator this issue.
What Sally doesn't know is that she's being watched by a secret, but sleazy, admirer.
No points for guessing who that is. Yes, it is Robotnik at his plot convenience monitor yet again. He states that he's been waiting for a woman with more power than him to come along all his life, that with her magic and his technology, they'd be unstoppable. Why, I think I'm in love! And in the time it took me to say that last paragraph, 50 new fanfics were written. That's the way the internet works, folks. We cut back to Sally in the forest, attempting to once again repeat what happened with the boulder, swinging her stick and commanding a log to rise. Unfortunately, it does not. This really is a magic staff. Not? Oh! Maybe I haven't been saying the right magic words. Aw, come on, Sally, you're supposed to be smarter than this. Even if you are a bit of a bitch in the early comics, you're still supposed to be the practical one. Well, before she can come to the logical conclusion that there is no magic, a wild Robotnik appears, offering her weeds and oil-filled chocolates, and finally a poem that I'm sure would make any kindergartner proud, before asking her to marry him. Sally realizes that, for some reason, Robotnik doesn't recognize her in her sorceress costume. Huh, I guess it has the same reality-warping powers as the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles trench coats. Robotnik dashes off, dragging Sally along, under the pretense that she will say yes, and we learn that Sonic has indeed taken the initiative and followed after Sally to make sure that she's okay. But instead of doing the logical thing and attacking Robotnik to save Sally right then and there, he decides to just follow after them and stay out of sight because of fear of reprisal for disobeying Sally's orders. Her stupid, dumb orders. Sonic follows them to Robotnik Hall, spelled H-A-U-L because rule of pun, just in time to see Robotnik revving up his new Wedomatic machine. Yes, that's right, folks, it's a wedding computer with googly eyes! Robotnik states that before the ceremony commences, his new bride will give a demonstration of her dark powers. Unless, of course, you're not a sorceress and are simply trying to make me look foolish. Dude, you're the one who made the assumption about her being a sorceress. This is kind of on you if she's not. Sonic figures that since he can't help Sally directly, he'll do so indirectly. So he whips himself into a tornado, which apparently makes him invisible. Einstein's rolling in his grave, folks. With his newfound superpower that shall never be used or mentioned again, Sonic gives Robotnik the runaround, eventually causing Robotnik to call the wedding off. Before he and his badniks can destroy her, Sonic drags her off, back out into the safety of an open field. On the way out, I guess Sally figured out it was Sonic who was rescuing her, and she asks him to stop. Sonic apologizes for disobeying, saying he was only trying to protect her. Sally gives him a kiss to show her appreciation. and then brains him over the head with the stick for disobeying her orders. Way to show your appreciation to the guy who pulled your ass out of the fire. Our comic ends with one last page of filler, and I'm left to sigh and shake my head. I didn't like this story much at all, and it hinges on Sally's actions and behaviors. Sally, in the early days, as I pointed out, was a far cry less competent than her SatAM counterpart, and how she would become later in the comic's run. Her characterization early on made her into more of a bratty control freak than anything else, and she's at her worst in this particular story. She's fully aware of how dangerous it is outside on her own, but she forbids anyone from accompanying her. She is saved from a situation she got herself into by a guy who was looking out for her, and she gives him a concussion. There's being independent, and there's being an ungrateful brat, and she has crossed that fine line. That sour grape of side, this issue is very, very middle of the road. The first story is actually pretty okay and has some nice sentiment to it, as well as a cute way of introducing the readers to Uncle Chuck. It also has some surprisingly nice logic to it, with the freedom fighters having to enter a very toxic environment that affected them negatively, while Sonic was able to use his brain to figure out a way to use that environment to his advantage. The second story would be okay if it weren't for Sally's behavior dragging the whole thing down. Really, that's my biggest complaint with it, which is a shame considering that the entire story basically hinges on her behavior. She doesn't even apologize or acknowledge that she made a mistake in the end. As hard as I try not to be biased in terms of what the characters will become, so I don't retroactively judge them, that doesn't work in this instance when you consider how she behaved in the Saturday morning cartoon show. It wouldn't even be this bad if she would at least admit that she made a mistake, or thanked Sonic properly for, saving her life. And that kiss doesn't count, as I'm pretty sure that's undone by the fact that she bashed his skull in. Stories aside, I also appreciate the fact that there's not a lot of filler in the comic either, which is always a plus. Overall, the issue is back down to middle of the road. It's got some good, but it's also got some glaring bad as well. I would recommend it for the first story, but not much else. Much like Sonic's invisible tornado trick, it blasts by unnoticed, is never brought up again, and you'll probably forget it exists before long. And thus we come to the end of issue 7 and start on our journey into issue 8. Things are going to start picking up from here on out, folks. Fingers crossed for some high-flying adventure next time, but I kinda doubt it. We're still in Gagland after all. See you there, everyone.
Yo, we're the Zone Runners, and this time we're at Pumpkin Hill. You ain't ready.
I ain't gonna let it get to me. I'm just gonna creep down in Pumpkin Hill. I got to find my lost piece. I know that it's here, I can sense it in my feet. The great emerald's power allows me to feel. I can't see a thing, but it's around somewhere.